Hey everyone, this is Pojo. It has been a really long time since I have done some brews that aren't my own, and that is a thing that we do here on Eternal Brews. So I am going to be talking today about a tournament list that was played in the ETS last Sunday, and actually won the series. It is based around Tavrod Auric Broker, a card that I have not been playing with too much and have been really excited to show off decks for, but just haven't been brewing with because I've just been looking at all sorts of different cards. I wanted to have some Tavrod decks out there because Tavrod is obviously a great card. He's really fun. He does a lot of cool things. He's just fun to play with in general, and he makes Minotaurs a lot more interesting. They're not usually all that great cards, and Tavrod makes them look a little bit interesting. This deck is actually not much of a Minotaur deck. It is more of a weapons-focused mid-range, and I think it's really fascinating. It was one of the 2 Tavrod decks to make it to the top 8. Tavrod did not dominate the meta, but he did do pretty well, and I think it's pretty interesting to talk about him a little bit. We will also be talking later in the video about how to deal with Tavrod and some stuff about, like, basically what it is that you want to be running against him, how to sort of organize against that card, because I know people have been having problems with him, and I want to stress that he's not like a ridiculous card. So we'll be talking about that a little bit as we play. Now, so the basic idea behind this deck is we are playing a sort of aggressive weapons style Rakano, similar to Deep Forged Plate Rakano in the idea that we are playing units that are somewhat hard to kill and pretty efficient, and then we're putting very good weapons on them to sort of do a lot of damage in the Argenport style. The Argenport style tends to involve a lot of lifesteal and a lot of sort of more direct routes than the Rakano deck. It does not use war cries. It basically just makes sure that it is winning on account of the fact that it has a higher life total than you and can thus be a lot more aggressive and never really have to turn and be defensive, which is always nice for that type of deck. In addition, this deck uses Bartholo the Seducer. If you do not have Bartholo the Seducer, Silverwing Familiar is a great substitution there. Tavrod is mostly necessary, but you can certainly try to play without him. Argenport weapon tempo works pretty well without him, and Moktos fits pretty okay in that slot as well. There might be a couple of other things that you can put in if you're looking for some sort of solution. All right, so let's break it down. We have a pretty decent amount of early removal. It's spread amongst multiple different options. Annihilate and Vanquish get rid of big stuff. Talon of Nostrix as a 2-of tends to represent either a unit type threat or something to get rid of small Aegis units, which can be very annoying, including, of course, Bartholo. You can also play you also have some later removal in the form of Slay and Auric Runehammer, both of which are pretty good at getting either direct amounts of removal or some amount of card advantage, which is really nice. The rest of the deck is focused around creatures and making those creatures bigger. Argenport Instigator is still one of the game's most efficient 2-drops. The drawback can often be beneficial to you, and when this thing gets lifesteal, it actually is beneficial to you in many different ways. So that's something to note because this deck does give this card lifesteal quite frequently. So interesting card in that respect. Bartholo the Seducer with the unblockable in the Aegis. This card needs to be dealt with or else it will become pretty devastating. Putting a Lethrai Falchion on this card is one of the best kind of curve outs that you can get, since you get a whole 6 damage and you bring the 6 health up. That just gets you well ahead against aggro decks. So Bartholo often demands 2 answers. That can be really strong in the right circumstances. He's not an amazing card all on his own. Sometimes you just want to use him to block, but most of the time he's going to be a reasonable way to push some damage and be okay. Auric Interrogator, our new Horus Travers card, is a 4/3, which is fairly efficient stats, and at the end of your turn, if it has 5 strength or more, he deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. He's most likely going to get 5 strength or more off of Tavrod, but you can give him additional strength through the cards Bloodletter and Lethrai Falchion, both of which give him lifesteal, which means that the 1 damage is going to negate itself. It'll deal 1 damage to you, and then you'll gain 1 life, which is always fun. The extra card draw allows this deck to be really aggressive while still having a little bit of extra way to sort of fill up the tank, and that's pretty important because Tavrod's not always going to be active for you, so that's something that really needs to be addressed, and Auric Interrogator addresses that problem quite well. Valkyrie Enforcer, another hyper-efficient 3-drop, really good stuff. The Summon Silence is just very useful. This card is pure kit in Argenport. He's almost always in these decks, and he's usually well worth running. And then finally, Impending Doom, a 5/5 for 4. As you can see, the hyper efficiency is all down the line with the exception of Bartholo, so you have a lot of good ways to generate really, really offensive units. And again, this self-damaging thing with lifesteal, it's a lot of fun. It's a cutesy thing to negate. Okay, and of course, Tavrod Auric Broker. Drawing Minotaurs and weapons from the top cards of your deck, mostly weapons in this case, and giving them +5 strength and discarding the rest. Tavrod will usually draw you, I would say, an average of 1 card in this deck, and it's pretty good when he does it. Like, basically, he will almost always get something for you, and that something will be pretty strong. So it's reasonable that every time that you attack with him, he's going to be good, and he has a really good stat line, as well as the hybrid colors, which makes him somewhat harder to kill. So good card, demands a silence, demands a direct answer, and tends to be the linchpin around which the deck is formed. Most of your time will be spent trying to figure out a way to play Tavrod and not get it killed. You are going to be, however, aggressing as much as possible to draw threats away from Tavrod and to just try and finish the game out on your own. Now, our weapons, Bloodletter, +3/+3 and lifesteal for 1 turn, and Lethrai Falchion, lifesteal for the entirety of the turns, but a much weaker stat line. These tend to render our units immune to torches, which is always good. Bloodletter in particular gives them a much bigger setup, and then of course the lifesteal allows you to negate damage that is dealt to yourself, as well as to gain back life from attacking in fairly relentlessly. So you get to be quite a bully here, and you get to do very well against aggro matchups, which is what you really, really want. I would describe this deck as somewhat tempo mid-range. It often does build a pretty frequent curve, but if it can't manage that, it can sometimes get away with playing Tavrod down and attacking in for a lot of advantage. You need to some way protect Tavrod, of course, so if you're playing against a deck that isn't running hard removal, that's really nice, but most of the time you're going to be looking for 2 or 3 drops, trying to find a sort of aggressive hand. So we're going to play some games with this. It's a real fun deck, so should be great to show off. And then we'll talk about one other deck, cool Reanimator shell that has been posted on the Reddit. And yeah, that'll be all of that. So I will see you guys in game. Cheers! Alright, so for round 1, we are up against Keenan. This opener is a little bit on the weak side. I've only got 2 power. I can Vara's Favor to double shadow, but I don't have a plan, basically, because I can't Valkyrie Enforcer. So we're going to redraw here, because there's no turn 3, turn 4 plan. So I think we will just go ahead and set up here. We've got Impending Doom. That's a little bit stronger. Yeah, this is looking much better. So Keenan drawing into his stuff. We got a decent amount of cards in hand, of course, obviously. Yeah, so Seed of Vengeance and Argenport banner. I am looking good on power. I will be able to get up to Tavrod without any issues, and I would like to find something early to play so that I can equip it with weapons, but if I just end up playing Impending Doom after Impending Doom, that's probably going to be fine. It appears to be an Argenport night tonight. We have a Argenport deck out right here. I'm going to go ahead and see Privilege of Rank play. There is a Tavrod Reanimator deck out right now that's playing a lot of Privilege, so we can maybe expect that. It's a little bit slower, but can be very, very effective, and the main thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we have Slays and Vanquishes out for Tavrod whenever possible.
I've got my eye on.
I think we'll just Annihilate that. So I'm going to play a Justice here, play Impending Doom. Annihilate can also be used on cards like Vara, but I think as long as I'm pushing damage, I'm feeling pretty happy about this, so we're going to go for that. See a Justice Sigil here, and we'll see how much removal he's got. Vanquishes and Slays are both pretty common. Looks like neither of those is happening here. So good stuff. Play an Auric Interrogator, hopefully not into a Harsh Roll. Keenan has some options, I'm guessing. We'll see what he plays. Vara's Favor.
Touch of shadow.
Gonna knock that down so he can Talon Nostrix, I'm guessing. Maybe he just has 3 Vara's Favors. That's kind of impressive. Alright. There you go. 3 Vara's Favors it is. Well, we'll just swing for 5. And play the second Impending Doom. This is looking pretty aggressive, but there is the possibility of a Harsh Rule, and if that happens, we're in trouble. Privilege Rank. Looks good. So he's getting pretty close to actually being able to cast Vara or Grinva, both of which are kind of scary cards in this deck. Grinva I'm not too worried about. Vara is also not all that terrifying here. Like, basically neither one really does quite what he wants to do. So I think we're probably okay. I could Lethrai Falchion here. I don't think I feel the need. Like, I have lethal either way. Gaining the extra life could be useful, but if there's going to be one Vanquish, I want to Lethrai Falchion the other one, and that'll secure me lethal. So he top decks a Slay, and then he plays, like, something into Vanquish. Okay, he's got the Vanquish. What's the other card? Anything? Shadow Sigil? Alright, so yeah, deck was trying to get up to 8. Got up to 8, but it's not that fast, so we'll just go ahead and knock it out, and that'll be a pretty simple game 1. Alright, so into game 2, we've got Kanshusji here. I have 3 power, I have a lot of stuff that I can actually play with that power. That's what I want. I want a sort of aggressive start. This is a much better hand than the hand that we had in the previous game, so looking pretty good. We're definitely going to hold on to this, and we'll be able to play Argenport Banner into Diplomatic Seal for the double green, or double Shadow because I can just play the Justice for double green. This deck has very light influence requirements. It literally just needs double green, double Shadow, so it's pretty reliable in terms of getting its units out. And that's always important. And the only, I think, major double green is Auric, Runehammer, and like they start at 4. Bartholo is of course kind of an issue, but not too bad. So we'll go ahead and play a Shadow here. That gets us Argenport Instigator down, and we can follow that up with Bartholo or with Valkyrie Enforcer, depending on what my opponent plays. I'm guessing nothing, because he's a Feln deck, so he's going to play something on 3 instead. But we'll see. Sometimes Feln decks have a good answer here, Suffocate or an Annihilate. Looks like neither today. We're going to see a Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike's fallen a bit out of favor. Bartholo can go ahead and set up here, so that'll get us a little bit started. Seed of Cunning gets him Feln Bloodcaster. No one's particularly surprised to see that. I'm going to go ahead and attack for 4. We're going to hold the Slay, because the Slay can be used for some other more necessary targets. And I can use Auric Runehammer here to pick up the Feln. Now, we're always pressuring damage, always pushing forward. Our deck is somewhat organized around the idea that we are a bit tempo. Like, we aren't quite, like, we're pretty close to mid-range in some senses, but we're also a bit tempo. It's a sort of a mix. Annihilate here gets us a 3/3 and then knocks that out. Attack for 2 here. I could play a second Bartholo, and that seems fine. It's not really one way or the other on that, although it will probably prevent him from playing any sort of removal on either one. They get to push for 4 each. The Feln Bloodcaster is another 4, and I've got the Lethrai Falchion. That's the card that I really, really want. So that allows me to attack for 8. The life gain off of Bartholo is very, very helpful here, and my opponent is not stacking enough removal in mass doses to really deal with that. He can pop the Aegis with Black Sky Harbinger. That's a scary card here. But my guys are still unblockable. They still deal 8, which is really, really good. And then I can Slay here if I want to get rid of the 3/5, which I think I do. The other alternative is to Auric Runehammer, which doesn't quite do it. Valkyrie Enforcer silences this unit, but if there's a champion, I think we just want to Slay here. So we're looking at potentially a couple of different ways that this could go. Lightning Storm kills one of them. Second Lightning Storm will kill a second one. But looks like we got it, so secured the win. Bartholo's a pretty tricky customer. Lightning Storms are one of the good ways to deal with him, but he just didn't have the right cards for it. So we set up a good win, and hey, we got a gold chest with 2 of them. Hey! Alright, let's see what's inside. Good. Good. Alright, we're up against Alarmadillo. Love that name. This is a weird opener. Bloodletter and Slay and Vanquish. I have some, like, sort of decent control. Tavrod's a reasonably good card to be getting into. I don't love it here. Tavrod is not, like, my favorite thing to just have, but I think with Vara's favor getting us a little bit of extra power and damage, like, we have some control elements to get us to other units that we can play early. Typically you want to play out enough threats that you can actually be scary with Tavrod later, but yeah, not happening here. We'll just Vara's favor.
Touch of shadow.
That draws us a shadow, and then if we can pick up a unit next turn, that would be ideal. So we've got Slay, we've got Vanquish, we have 2 Bloodletters. Seed of Vengeance allows us to play a little bit closer to Tavrod. If we can find Impending Doom, that would be ideal. Praxis Banner into Infinite Hourglass. Now, Praxis is good news here, because Praxis is traditionally not that great against Tavrod. We get 2 Valkyrie Enforce here. My opponent might have torches, he might have good answers, but most of the Praxis stuff, they don't really run a lot of great answers to Tavrod. He does have some blue in here as well, so there's a couple of possibilities. See an Unstable form into a Levitate on Library Phoenix, and a Northwind Herald popping down to get that, of course, excellent Unstable form itself. Now, if I were to allow him to Unstable form that into something, I think I'd be actually okay with that. Like, the Library Phoenix reduces the cost of my cards right now, which is sweet. If I just attack here, he might even take the trade. He didn't, but I get to play Tavrod. If he wants to Unstable form Tavrod into a 6-drop, that's also fine. Unstable form on the 3-2, not a surprise. Turns it into a 7-7. Seed of Impulse, and an Ageless Mentor to buff things up. Ah, this is my fun stable Syndon list. How delightful. Okay, cool. So we got very, very cheap lifesteal stuff. That's really, really good. I want to Vanquish, Slay. Man, can I just go for broke? Let's go for broke. I can't go completely for broke, but I can get pretty close. Vanquish, Slay. Alright. Yeah, not great using your unstables early. Doesn't always feel that awesome, but rough day. Alright, so this round we have a 3-drop and a 4-drop. I feel pretty comfy that that's going to be right. Diplomatic Seal gets me double Shadow. I've got double Justice as well. That's everything that I'm looking for in an early game. This deck does run a lot of weapons and a couple of Minotaurs, but the thing about that is that it... Ooh, Horus. I'm so glad to see people using Horus. That card is actually quite nice. It might be a stranger deck in particular, but Horus can actually fix influence for some stuff that you really need to fix influence for on occasion. So, could be a really interesting card in this situation. Seek Power. I'm guessing he's looking for a 4th color. And if he plays a 4th color, we'll know that he's a stranger stack. Okay. So what was I saying? Auric Interrogator gets the Bloodletters, which allows him to get some lifesteal, or I can play Impending Doom, both of which are really, really good options. Yeah, we should be able to get to Tavrod if possible, but in a weapons deck, that was where I was at, in a weapons deck, you have that issue where your opening hands can be a little unreliable. You won't always have the early tempo that you want to push into the mid-range. And as a result, you might end up like waiting until 5 to play Tavrod, at which point, you know, it can be a little bit rough, a little bit rocky. So you always want to look for hands that have some early game in them, because not only does that draw removal away from Tavrod, who has only so many different answers that you can have for him, but it's also just really, really good for setting up against a lot of opposing strategies. Okay, yeah, this deck is actually running a lot of different stuff and not just Horus Trappers. That's a really good idea. I appreciate it. I think it's a good plan. Now, if I use Bloodletter here, I will get a 6/7, which can be blocked. I will gain 7 life, or Auric Interrogator will not draw cards. I can also play Impending Doom here, set up some defense.
Embrace the shadow.
And just hold on to the Auric Interrogator for a turn. I do want to Bloodletter it, but I don't think I want to do it this turn. Do I want to block here? No, I've got lifesteal. We're happy to trade over, under, however we feel. Okay, so now we have Bartholo the Seducer. I'm going to slay this Crimson Firemaw. And I'm going to attack for 9. And then when things get out of hand, we're just going to Bloodletter either our Auric Interrogator or our 5/5. Depending on whether or not we can get Auric Interrogator across for 1 damage and draw that card. Quarry looks good. Now putting weapons on Bartholo is always tempting, and it is very strong, but we don't have to do it immediately. We can just play Bartholo as our 2nd card and Bloodletter something else to get extra damage across. Crimson Firemaw trades with Impending Doom, which we'd be perfectly comfortable with. I'm going to Bloodletter here and swing with both. If he wants to block the Firemaw, that's fine. And it turns out he does. we'll play Bartholo, because we have a really decent amount of extra stuff here, and a Lethrai Falchion plus Bloodletter is very close to lethal. Now I have Vanquish for Impending Doom, which is good. I've gained enough life that I'm not too worried about the Impending Doom itself. And actually, if Impending Doom deals 1 damage to him this turn, I don't think it's going to matter too much what he's got. Because Bartholo will be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is exactly enough. So Lethrai Falchion, Bloodletter, and that's 9 damage, right underneath. That's looking good. We're going to look for some games where we can actually play Tavrod, so should be fun stuff. Alright, here we are up against Register. This opener has a 4-drop, some removal. It's okay. I don't think I like it enough to keep it, but it is kind of even on influence. I'm not really worried about influence and power as much in this deck as I am in other decks. We'll probably redraw this. I like Impending Doom, but I want some 2 and 3 drops. Okay, good. We found it. So we're going to go ahead and play the Argenport banner. And then after that, we can follow it up with Seed of Vengeance. That'll get us Argenport Instigator. Bartholo follows that, so pretty straightforward. We got just a good unit into a good unit. And if these units get removed, then Tavrod will follow up and really start to punish. That's kind of exactly the curve that we're looking for. This is the ideal thing for the Argenport deck to be doing.
You look lost.
Okay, Lethrai Ranger represents a pretty significant threat, but it's also probably going to get flying, and I have a lot of lifesteal stuff in my deck. So I don't think I'm worried about this card. I think I'm just going to attack for 3. If my opponent wants to levitate to not get blocked by Bartholo, that would be fine. I could also block with Bartholo, and that would mean that I don't get pressured by a 4/4 every turn for a while, which I'd be happy with, I think. Yeah, let's do it. Cool. Dead Lethrai Ranger. Now the question is, are we going to see a Gorgon Fanatic? Because if we do, things get a little tricky. Direwood Beastcaller would be even worse.
A single shot is all it takes.
Okay, Instigator is a card, but it's not as good a card as a Lethrai Falchion Instigator, so we're going to feel pretty happy about that. Swing for 7 here, and hopefully we can draw the big removal. If we draw the big removal, then this double Tavrod will be just great. Having 1 Tavrod is not that amazing. Having 2 Tavrod's pretty good. Dark Return gets back Lethrai Ranger. I'm pretty okay with that. We're going to go ahead and see a 3/3 there. Now, with Tavrod, like, this person's doing the wise thing if he does have removal. He's saving it for Tavrod. That's really something that you want to be doing, because Tavrod is certainly a really easy card to deal with if you just are holding onto your removal, you're keeping your slays and your death strikes. Everything about a Tavrod deck is about trying to force your opponent to play out removal that he wouldn't otherwise have. That Rapid Shot would suggest that he doesn't have very good removal, or that he's holding onto the good removal specifically for Tavrod. So this might be a really, really good day. Tavrod comes down. We've got the Primal. And if Register has Polymorph, Death Strike is the good answer. Any type of hard removal is very, very scary. So he did the right thing there. And yeah, like Tavrod, basically, I've heard some comments, along the lines of Tavrod is completely broken. I would like to stress that he is not. As a 5-cost unit, he does not do anything to immediately influence your hand or your opponent's life total, or any of the things that give you permanent advantage over the course of the game. He has to attack to get that permanent advantage, which is the card advantage that he offers, as well as the size advantage that he offers to your other cards. So, like, basically he's a unit where you're playing him on the gamble that you can get value later, and it's a pretty good game. He's somewhat hard to kill. There's a lot of things that you can do, like Slay, Vanquish, Polymorph, Death Strike. Let's see here. Slay, Vanquish, Polymorph, Death Strike. You can basically just try to damage him out. You can silence him, of course. Anything where a Valkyrie Enforcer or a Desert Marshal doesn't fully answer, but answers well enough. And if you can do any of that, then, like, you don't get a good amount of advantage out of Tavrod. You just get a pretty reasonable body for 5. But, like, I would say he's actually, like, yeah, I say he's a pretty reasonable card, and overall I haven't had too many problems dealing with him on the ladder, so, but it always does feel a little demoralizing to lose to Tavrod, so people can get really sort of a confirmation bias off of that, and I think that's important to note. Tavrod is not completely overpowered. I would wager that he's not even like doing super well right now, but he is a really good card, and he does really well in good decks. We'll attack here. We get Auric Interrogator, which is great, and if we get a weapon too, oh man, that's beautiful. You don't usually get that lucky in this deck. Minotaurs are in fairly short supply. Picking up other Tavrods is the best, of course, but if you can pick up Auric Interrogator, Interrogator can draw you some cards, and Valkyrie Enforcer can silence this 4/4 if I need to, but I think we've got the value engine actually rolling. My opponent didn't have the right answers, so we're going to be in pretty good shape from here on out. Diplomatic Seal, Gorgon Fanatic. Alright, that's a card that's pretty scary. I'm very glad that we didn't see that card early, because if we had, then he'd be running a pretty serious value engine on us. But now, we just get to Valkyrie Enforce it. And that might be the point where we see the forfeit. Nope. Okay, good. That means we get more rolls with Tavrod, which is really important. I could avoid attacking with Minotaur Interrogator, but I think I just want to start pressing in for damage, trying to finish this game before anything crazy happens. At the moment, we're going to be fully flush on cards, so as long as we're just trading stuff up, that's the best thing to do. Okay, and he's got a good set of blocks here. We'll just kill the 4/4. And then the 3/9 blocks 3/2. And we can play down Instigator or Bartholo. Bartholo's the best choice since I have Lethrai Falchion, and he's only got one card left, so Lethrai Falchion should secure lethal. Alright, Annihilate there. We got the Valkyrie Enforcer, pretty good stuff. And swinging in with the Lethrai Ranger. Probably. Other fun things to do with Tavrod, you can Madness him. The card Touch of the Umbran, which hasn't been seen a lot. If you're playing like some kind of rampy decks, Touch of the Umbran is a really fun thing to do with him, especially if you actually have weapons or Minotaurs in your deck. You can do stuff to silence him, you can do stuff to weaken him. Mostly, it's best to go for some kind of hard removal. A lot of the traditional meta stuff that's been very popular for a very long time, like Armory, doesn't do very well against him, so he is representing a very significant meta shakeup, so that's kind of nice. So I should probably stop delaying on this person, so yeah, we'll talk about him a little bit more in the postmortem, but that was a good game, and we got some good Tavrod tricks with him, so I did like that a lot. Yeah, he's a fun card. I really enjoy him, and I'm having a delightful time with him. Alright, that does it for today's Eternal Brews. This deck is from the Reddit. I changed up like maybe 1 or 2 cards, but it is an Argenport Reanimator deck, and the basic idea is to get Tavrod back a little bit earlier and to use Vara the Fate Touch to bring Tavrod back over and over again, which can be really, really effective. I've had that used against me before, and it never feels good to have Vara bring something back, but Tavrod's one of the best targets that I've seen. In addition, Grinva, Judge of Battles, tends to work out very well as a really cool harsh rule target, and with the extra strength bonuses that Tavrod is giving to certain Minotaurs, it tends to be pretty effective at making like some interesting control things happen. I've seen this deck around the ladder a couple of times. I think we faced it once in our Brews video, or in the video, and yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting deck. Quite a lot of fun if you're looking for a slower version of the Tavrod deck. One last thing before I go, like we were talking a little bit about how all of the different options to deal with Tavrod, and I know this is going to be a question for a lot of new players, so we're going to talk a little bit about like what it is that you need to do to kill Tavrod and what it is that you want to build into your deck if you're worried about Tavrod in the meta. Now, there are some colors that Tavrod is particularly good against. In particular, he's very good against Skycrag or mono fire decks. Both of those don't really have amazing tools for dealing with him. Blue has some tools, but fire does not really have anything that deals 7 damage, and high health units are traditionally a weakness for that. With fire or with fire decks, you do need to in some way go around him or over him. So Soulfire Drake, direct damage burn, lots and lots of small units. And instead of focusing on killing Tavrod, you want to focus on killing all of the units that surround Tavrod and getting rid of all of the lifesteal stuff so that you can kill him before he actually gets to activate Tavrod and put himself back into a position of strength. Tavrod takes a while to get his advantage engine going, and even after it's going, it takes a while for it to spin up to its full potential. So the more that you can do to your opponent when he's running Tavrod, the better off you're going to be. You don't want to save stuff for Tavrod unless you really feel that you can stack some stuff on Tavrod and still win the game. So that's the basic idea behind like the fire matchup. Now in time, there are a lot of different things you can do. You can do slow effects, such as, of course, slow, or the 5-cost 3/4 that slows them, Time Weaver. You can also do teleport effects to bounce Tavrod back. Remember that he is a fairly slow card in getting his advantage engine going, so cards like Praxis Displacer, even Teleport are pretty okay. Silence effects work very well on Tavrod. They leave the body intact, and the body is something that you're going to have to deal with eventually. But of course, running Dispel or Steward of Prophecy is a personal favorite of mine. Anything where you are able to silence the card like Desert Marshal or Valkyrie Enforcer, if you can get rid of that extremely powerful attack, then Time is usually quite capable of defending itself against a 5 damage attacker and getting to the point where it can finally start to overwhelm that deck. In addition, that also disables a lot of the permanent benefits that these cards get, so it's pretty good against Tavrod in particular. You can also go bigger than Tavrod. Xenon Obelisk gets you to the point where your Sandstorm Titans stand up pretty well against it, and if you can get a Xenon Obelisk down, then Predatory Carnosaur will kill Tavrod, which is nice. Deadly units like Scorpion Wasp and Blistersting Wasp will deal with Tavrod, but you will get, of course, that card advantage loss, so reactive strategies aren't quite as good, especially since Tavrod tends to run Slay, Extract, Vara's Favor, so mostly look for proactive removal to deal with him. In Shadow, you have a lot of different options for this. Annihilate, Deathstrike, Feeding Time, Combust, Desperado. Some other ones that I think I really like to recommend to people that I'm sure haven't been used enough. Madness is extremely good against Tavrod Auric Broker, especially with a sacrifice outlet available. If you're playing Subvert, Tavrod is usually one of the last cards in your opponent's hand, so it's very easy to steal him and get all of that sweet, sweet card advantage for yourself. Azindel's Gift limits the amount of value that Tavrod can get. When he attacks, he's going to get those weapons, but that means that he's going to have to discard them immediately. So he can only build 1 to 2 big units, and with hard removal in your deck, you're going to feel a lot better about it. And finally, Touch of the Umbran just to steal Tavrod forever. It's a pretty good time. A 5/7 lifesteal can be great, and Touch of the Umbran is particularly good against endurance units because one of its main weaknesses is that it does not ready units. So anything with endurance is going to be usable immediately and will get you a pretty big swing, more than enough to justify its 8 cost. So interesting things, all of them. And oh yeah, I forgot Vara's Choice. Vara's Choice. In Primal is the tricky one. People often don't know the answers in Primal. Unstable Form is one of them. If you're playing Unstable Form, you can answer a lot of threats that just don't quite match up to you, and you can then permafrost them. Polymorph works very, very well, and you should be running Polymorphs in a Tavrod meta. Rain of Frogs is pretty good. Killer Cersos are quite nice. In Huru, Levitate Bring Down is also not that bad an idea, and Island's Choice, while not giving you the card advantage and being somewhat reactive, is still pretty cool. So lots of different options there. I think the only card I forgot to mention is Praxis's Purify. Any type of silence effect is quite strong. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to deal with Tavrod. Basically, just think about how it is that you want to mitigate and get around him. And whatever it is that is your battle plan to win the game. Are you trying to go bigger than him? Are you trying to just kill him and get him out of the way? Like, sometimes silencing him is all that you need to do. Sometimes mitigating his card advantage is all that you need to do. If you can just target all of the things around him, you'll be okay. But most of the time, you're going to be looking for direct removal for this card. So yeah, that's my basic breakdown on Tavrod and what to do about him. So yeah, this deck's really interesting and fun, so if you are interested in trying out other Tavrod decks, that's always fun, and if you can't beat him, you can always join him, but you can beat him, and I think it's a pretty good idea to try. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time, and we'll be back with more Eternal Brews very, very soon. Cheers!